Oftentimes in Commander, you have probably heard the phrase, "My life total is a resource," or "Your life total is a resource and you should use it as such." I'm here to tell you that not only is that not the case, but also that it is losing you Commander games by having this mentality. There are so many times where I've heard someone just take 5 or even 10 damage and say, "This is okay, my life total is a resource." There are plenty of times where people have just said, "My life total is a resource, so I'm perfectly fine with paying 5 life in order to do X removal or X spell to go through." It doesn't make any sense when you really think about it. The phrase "my life total is a resource" is often used and said in Commander or in constructed 60 card formats. The biggest difference is that in constructed 60 card formats, you have 20 life, and every life that you have matters. There's no such thing as commander damage, and the closest thing you have to something like that is infect. And since every single point matters, there are often times where, yes, trading for life in order to accelerate your game plan that much further is worth it in a 60 card format. Shock lands or pain lands or any bolt lands are worth it, but they have to make a certain trade because most games in 60 card formats are ending by turn 5, 6, and sometimes even 7. Now, of course, if you're playing something like Domain Overlords or a control deck, it might be a lot longer, but in those cases, those control decks are still trying to keep themselves as healthy as possible so that they can get to that point in the first place, which is why it would make sense to say that their life is a resource. Now, my biggest drawback to why I don't think life total is a resource in something like Commander is simply because in Commander, there are so many ways where one board state can go from seemingly useless to a lethal board state with one spell cast, or maybe even 2 spell casts. The amount of life total swings and the amount of swinging out and cracking back in Commander is way more threatening and way more lethal than it is in a 60 card constructed format. 60 card formats are usually known because you know exactly what the other person's running. Typically, there are net decks or there are certain archetypes in the actual format itself. In which case, I know in certain matchups, I can use my life total a little bit more sparingly than if I'm against something like a mono red deck. It doesn't make any sense for me to allow the mono red deck to deal a ton of damage to me if I know I'm not going to be able to stabilize until turn 5 or 6. Whereas I know I can do that against a more mid-range matchup or a more combo matchup. It's the same thing as an aggro deck. As an aggro deck, I don't care how much damage I'm taking because I know I'm going to be able to kill my opponent before they can kill me. Commander doesn't have to deal with any of these concepts, but it's also why I'm saying that this phrase, "my life total is a resource," does not translate over to Commander. Do you know how many games are won by using a Craterhoof Behemoth? My board of 9 1/1s that are seemingly useless, I get 1 Worldly Tutor and cast a Craterhoof, or I cast 1 Natural Order and Craterhoof comes onto the battlefield uncounterable. My completely useless board state is now a lethal threat on any player. And now when these players have not worried about their life total, they've used their quote-unquote life as a resource, they're now at 20 life and I win the game. Whereas if they were a bit more healthy and they were a bit more worried about how low their life total gets, I can maybe only kill 1 or 2 of them, which means another player still has a chance to win the game. I'm simply saying this because a lot of times people are very careless with their life total and they don't care to stay healthy during a Commander game. They're fine with taking 3 damage here or there. They're fine with taking 5 damage. They're fine with, I'm not going to block because I don't want to lose my resources. Which leads to a lot of mistakes where just because you have 40 life, that doesn't mean anything. 40 life or even full health in a 60 card constructed format is relatively healthy. And you're not usually going to just get from one turn nothing to another turn 20 damage straight to your face. But in something like Commander, which is so spiky and so Timified, you're going to get an overrun out of nowhere. You're going to get Beastmaster Ascensioned. You're going to get Craterhoofed, and you're going to lose 50 health in 1 turn. Crackle with Power will destroy any table if they're even the least bit unhealthy. Torment of Hailfire, a big spell, is going to get you if you are just the least bit unhealthy. Especially when it comes down to the wire in something like Commander, and you have taken a little bit and a little bit and a little bit over and over and over again. You now put your head up and you realize, oh my gosh, I'm only at 25 life. On turn 8 or 9, when the game has stalled out a little bit and you're at 25 life, 20 life, 15 life, it is really easy to take you out as a player. But it's not so easy when they're trying to swing out for the game and they have one player at 40 life and the rest of the table at 20 life because they've been irresponsible. Who do you think they're going to take out? Probably 2 players instead of 1, which still gives you a chance to stay in the game. So because of this, my whole point of this video is to try to stay as healthy as possible. Now, this doesn't necessarily mean that you have to add cards that help you gain life over time, like Authority of the Consuls or Soul Warden or Essence Warden, but it definitely isn't something you shouldn't think about. Having some sort of incremental life gain that can happen throughout a game is really good, especially if your deck can trigger it multiple times a game. Something like a Soul Warden or an Essence Warden is that good because every single player just actively playing the game allows you to keep your life total healthy. And especially if you have a token deck and somebody else has a token deck, you're going to be very healthy throughout a game. Something in black that you can use is Blood Artist, which is really nice. Blue doesn't really have any kind of life gain effects that allow you to stay healthy throughout the game, but blue is very good at making tokens or just stopping people from attacking you in the first place. And red, of course, being the most aggressive color, it's going to be difficult for them to ward people off, but if you're in red, in most cases, you're able to actually use your life total somewhat as a resource because you're trying to kill them faster than they can kill you. Now, let's talk about when your life total actually is a resource in Magic the Gathering. In most cases, you're only going to see this concept actually be put in play in something like CEDH. In casual games, you're almost never going to see a Necropotence, and you're almost never going to see an Ad Nauseam, and you're not really going to see any of these kind of decks that really care about using as much life as possible to get as much card advantage as possible in order to help win the game. Here is my total thought process about this entire concept. Unless you actively paying your life in order to further your game plan is a key part of your strategy, your life total is not really a resource. That is why something like Necropotence, Necrodominance, or Ad Nauseam is considered life as a resource, because you are actively choosing to hinder your life total in order to further your game plan. However, most decks are not doing this. You allowing your Shockland or your Boltland to come in untapped is not necessarily the same thing as using a Necropotence in order to draw 10 to 15 cards, or allowing a Tymna trigger to deal some damage to you, but you get to draw cards. They are not the same thing. And oftentimes in decks that don't really care too much about these things, usually in CEDH they're going to stay healthy, which is why you usually attack the black player. But in a casual game, having Shocklands and Bolt lands and any of these pain lands that will deal consistent damage to you is only hurting you. Having these spells that do cost life in order to cast them is only hurting you. Allowing other people to get in for damage because you don't want to lose your creatures or you don't want to make quote unquote enemies in the game is only hurting you in the long run and losing you more games than it's winning you. The amount of times people win on low health and low life totals is astounding. So imagine if they just allowed some of these things to happen to them in order to lose life. Those situations wouldn't happen nearly as much because they didn't care about staying healthy going into the late game. And that's pretty much all I have for this video. I was planning on uploading this a lot sooner. It's been quite a while since I have posted anything on this channel, and I realized that I've been on a bit of a hiatus, and I was gonna post this earlier, but on the day that I was getting ready to upload and finish this video up, EDH Deck Building actually posted a video very similar to this one. I like a lot of the ideas that he gave, and I agree with most of it. Life totals in something like Commander are not nearly as much of a resource as it is in 60 card formats or in CEDH formats. And so I just wanted to give my 2 cents on this topic and tell you how I thought about this as well. Thank you guys all so much for watching, and I'll see you guys all next time.